Hey, thanks for coming by the channel. I'm super excited to start this new series on business tips for actors and artists. And I couldn't be more happy to start this process with my good friend, Lovinder Gill. I've known him for years. He is an award-winning writer, producer, and director. He's taught at multiple universities across the country, and he's about to launch his book on screenwriting called SCRIPTCAKE. He has a podcast by the same name that has some amazing interviews on it. You absolutely should check it out. I will put the description and the link below. I heard this quote from Michael Douglas when I was in graduate school that basically talked about you being, CEO of You Inc. and you got to know how to run your business. And I heard another one of the actors from Murphy Brown said this. He said, my dad always used to be on my case about, okay, what's your plan B? And he was like, plan A. Like, I don't have a plan B, because and his mentality was, if I have a plan B, I'm going to use plan B. Mm-hmm. So those two sound bites, especially in graduate school, when I was like moving into this whole thing and in earnest, is stuck in my head. And so one of the things that I want to do is have these interviews, encourage people that are coming up in it from a business standpoint. It's not a channel about teaching people how to act. It's a channel about teaching people how to take what they've learned and monetize it.
That's probably the biggest gap that exists. I've always said, when I went to film school, they taught me how to go from an idea for a film to here you've outputted onto a DVD. At least back then it was a DVD. Now it's a hard drive. Okay.
Right.
But there was no discussion about before that, like how do you raise the money and how do you develop and how do you do all that kind of stuff. And then there was no discussion on the back end about, okay, now that you've made a film, how do you actually make money with this film? What do you do? Where do you go? And, exactly. what's that part of it? And I think across the board in the arts, that's lacking.
Yeah.
I think that
I remember when we did Chicks 101, right? It was kind of like, I always describe it like this. It was like me and you kind of standing in the valley, kind of looking up at Mount Everest and like, hey, you want to go climb that? You're like, yeah, sure.
Why
not? No gear, no nothing, man. We're just like, spit and grits, just going, all right, let's go, man.
Yep. But you know what? That movie was probably the best education we could have ever gotten.
Totally.
In the industry. 100%. I mean, this is how unprepared we were. We shot the movie on 35 millimeter, sent the film to the lab. Didn't have enough money to get it back from the lab. Had to wait 6 months after we shot the movie to raise more money to actually see the first second of footage. We didn't see the movie for 6 months, man. It was crazy.
Right. And people wonder why it takes 5 years for a movie to come out, especially in indie, right?
Yeah. Yeah, there's so much beyond just the writing a good story and acting in it, directing in it, and making it happen. It's maybe a third of the process.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where 90% of people spend 99% of their time is on 1/3 of the process. And I think you designing this page to offer people, this channel to offer people information to the other 2/3. That's how you become a professional. You got to have, you're one-dimensional if all you can do is act or write. You got to be 3-dimensional and understand how all the other aspects go. One of the things that I always tell any students I talk to, how can I be successful? How can I, I'm like, are you a business minor? No. Become a business minor, because you're going to need to know all that information.
100%.
And what's funny about it is most people go into the arts to get away from number crunching and business and all that kind of stuff.
Yes. I say that 100%. It was like actors want to do artistic things, right? Artists want to do artistic things, whatever the medium, be it acting or whatever else, because they don't want to hold down a 9 to 5, but don't realize they have to do 10 times the work for less than half the paycheck.
Well, but the fact of the matter is, if you're choosing to be an artist of any kind, you're choosing to be an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You are starting a business called, like my business is Lovinder Gill Incorporated. Actually, it's an LLC, but your business is, Keith Harris LLC, and all the stuff that comes with opening an actual business, whether it's an online store or a real, storefront, whatever you're doing, any kind of business, all of that applies to our businesses. Yes. We have to know how to, keep receipts and how to write off stuff on our taxes and how to pay stuff quarterly and how to, market and how to network and how to do all the things that are required of just basically any business. If there's one thing that you want to take from this discussion is understand, by choosing to be an artist, you're choosing to be an entrepreneur. Yeah.
And for actors in particular, right? We think, yuck, corporate. But I guess technically everybody, but actors in particular, are going into one of the very things that they have no desire to do, which is sales.
Right.
That's sales, right? And the actor is in one of the worst markets possible to go into sales because the market is so saturated. Everybody and their brother wants to be an actor or an artist of some kind, but it's what's called a buyer's market.
You and I have had some wonderful experiences with auditions with actors over the years.
Yeah, we were auditioning for the film Chicks 101, and we had put out a blurb.
Yes, it was the New York version of Backstage.
Yeah.
And we expected like 20 or 30 headshots or something, and we got crates.
3,000 or some kind of craziness, right? We got them from Australia and the UK. We got them
all over the world. I remember I went to the post office in this little tiny town in North Carolina, and there was a P.O. box, and there was a slip saying "Come to the front desk," and I was confused, and I went and I handed him the front desk, and the guy goes, "Oh, it's you." And I'm like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he goes, "What are you driving?" I'm like, "An SUV." He goes, "That should be fine." And I'm like confused, and then just crate after crate after crate. And I was like, "Holy crap!" Yeah, we spent days just going through them, and we got headshots with resumes handwritten on spiral bound paper. Didn't even take the little edges off the spiral bound paper, just folded it up and set it out.
Dug it in.
We got headshots on Polaroid cameras. We got pictures of people in like costumes sitting on a throne, just like this.
Yes.
It was just insane. I mean, like, here's the deal. We were making our first film. Didn't really have much of money, didn't really have anything, kind of nobody's in the business. And over half the people that sent us stuff were ineligible to even be considered, just based on the lack of professionalism.
Yeah.
Which goes back to being that business and that entrepreneurial person and understanding how this kind of stuff works. So, and that is still the case today. We did I just directed a film last year, Seclusion. You can see it right over here. There's a little chair. And we had to do Zoom, what do you call it, casting sessions because of COVID. And one dude, he's sitting there and his den's in the background, and he's got this like 100-inch TV that's on and making noise in the background while we're trying to audition the guy. And I'm like, "What are you doing, man? I don't care how good your audition is. I'm not going to cast you if you don't have enough sense to turn your TV off in order to be on an audition,
Yeah. And it's And that's true across the board. I mean, you know, the saying, you never get a second chance to make a first impression, right? That is across the board in business and life and everything else, but especially if you're, you know, an actor and you're pursuing these things, right? That's your first impression, right? So it's got to be strong, right? And because I went into a casting office in LA when I lived out there, and this was before all the electronic submissions. So, you know, always, you know, paper headshots, hard copies coming in, everything. I'm going to tell you what, there was a room that was stacked about as high as my waist, 3 deep, of pictures that wrapped around the room, like 3 walls of the room.
Wow.
And I just remember standing in that going, how does anyone ever make it to the top of that pile?
Right.
So, and that was just a real, and that's, I always say, you know, when I went out to LA, that's when it really hit me that it's called show business, and business is the bigger word. And, you know, I went out there determined, you know, I'm not going to go out there and, you know, say, hi, I'm an actor. Can I take your order? Right. I wasn't going to do that. And I did it for a year. Right. I worked temp jobs, and I was working for a car dealership and all these other things. But after about a year of just kind of getting settled out there, it hit me, you know, the time I'm spending during business hours, the show business is set in those same hours.
Yeah.
And I have to free that time up in order to pursue what I'm doing. And so, you know, it's revelations like that that I'm trying to help people understand.
It is badly needed, my friend.
Yeah.
You know, working as a producer and a director, as well as a screenwriter, it is badly needed. Because, you know, I'll still have people just kind of randomly reach out to me for screenwriting stuff, as if we're best friends when we've never met and we've never had a conversation. And can you read my script? Can you this? Can you? No, I won't. You know, and again, I'm nobody in the business, and I still want to do stuff because I don't have time for it. The same thing with acting. I own a business outside of the industry, and on my card is my cell number, and my card is there to give to any, you know, customers that I, you know, are not having a great experience or have deeper questions than my employees can handle. And one person came in and, you know, was in acting school, and, you know, the person working, oh yeah, the guy that owns this place, you know, works in the film industry, got my card and just hounded me.
Oh, wow.
And just not professionally at all. You know, at the very least, if you're going to reach out to somebody, just be very calm and subtle and apologetic about the whole thing. All right. And, you know, and again, I'm on a small scale. Imagine these people that have a room full of headshots. You know, one of the stories.
That's why there's gatekeepers.
They have to be.
Yeah.
Because it's an industry that everybody wants to get into, and professionalism is the first thing. You got to make that great first impression. You know, like, I will take a professional person who's an okay actor over an amazing actor who's not professional. Just can't deal with it. You know, I'll pull a performance out of somebody if I have to. But you got to understand the ins and outs of that process. And I think that your YouTube page is going to go a long way towards helping a lot of people do that.
Yeah. And it's you know, it is a business of relationships. And, you know, one of the things that I tell students, especially as they're starting out, you know, I met you originally when you were in film school, and I was in grad school for acting, right?
That's right. Yeah.
We originally met, right? So, you know, I always tell students, especially that are just starting out, you know, target the film schools, right? Get in there, because those people have the same desire that you have, right?
That's right.
Make it. And if they're producers, writers, directors, figure out, you know, those relationships, start them early and maintain them, because they're going to go on and make movies. You're going to go on and make movies, and you never know how you're going to be able to help each other.
you know, and I'll take that even a step further. One time I got hired to write a prequel to a movie that had done very well on DVD for some people. And the person that was directing that had actually directed you in a film before I had, David Rotan. And as I'm working on the script, he just, you know, looks at me and goes, "Oh, by the way, make sure there's a role for Keith." Like for any casting before, and that's a direct, you know, result of A, your abilities, and B, your relationship, you know, because we know Keith's going to come in and kill it.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, it's the first time I've ever written something with a particular actor in mind, and you being such a close friend of mine, I just so made fun of you about the entire screenplay. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do. The pasty white cowboy.
That's right. Pasty white, red hair. And I'm like, he takes off his shirt and it blinds people and the sun reflects off of him. And my favorite moment of that process was when Roger Willie, who's a fantastic actor. Actually, Roger, and if you can see this piece of artwork right here, Roger made that. He made that.
Oh, he did that? Nice.
Yeah, he gave that to me as a gift, that horse painting with an eagle in it. And
he was fantastic. He was in Wind Talkers.
He was in Wind Talkers, and he's been in a few other things as well. He was in Wesley. So you told me, he walks up to you, he goes, "Man, you look just like that person described in the script." And I'm like, yeah, victory is mine.
So it's funny. So like you mentioned that relationship. So with the Rotans, I was getting out of graduate school, and I applied to one of those blurbs in the North Carolina film version of Backstage.
Right.
And I talked to him, auditioned, got the part. But I'm telling you, we did this movie on a $1.50 and a cheese doodle, man. It was like literally we shot it on weekends. Super what's the Rebel Without a Crew, Robert Rodriguez style. We shot it on weekends, 2 days a week, Saturday, Sunday, for like 2.5, 3 months. And we shot it all over North Carolina. And this was really kind of predating all the digital stuff. So this guy bought a old Canon news camera that had like a turret lens on the front. You know, like you just
like the three different lenses. Yeah.
And you turned it on. It was non-sync.
Was it like a Bolex? Was it a Bolex?
I think it was a Bolex. Yeah. It was non-sync. You turn it on and it's like. So the way it was psycho. So we went through the process. We would shoot the scene, and he told us early on, this is how we're going to do it. You're going to shoot the scene. And then when you're done with the scene, remember how you did it and how you said it. And we stepped off in the corner and we did the scene again into a little Radio Shack microphone that was plugged into a Hi8 video camera. And did the dialogue again as close as we could to what we did in the scene. So it was that immediate onset ADR that we were doing. And then he was taking it, and then he sunk it all up. And there was a lot of moments where, you know, if somebody's on the phone, they're reading the newspaper, and the newspaper, like, you know, cuts the mouth off, or you're walking away from, you know, waving as you say bye-bye. So he doesn't have to worry about those sync moments. But you know, it was that relationship and that process that I did. You know, I paid for all my own gas. I paid for, you know, and I used footage. It was the very first lead that I'd been cast in a feature film. So that was, you know, that was a mark. That was a check mark. That was, and I used footage from that movie on my demo reel for, I can't tell you, years. Yeah, so it was that, it's out of that process. I've gone on to do, let's see, both, 2, 3.
Didn't you just do a movie with David?
Features,
like
four other feature films.
Yeah.
So, and one of the more immediate payoffs when I moved back from LA, I started doing some work at School of the Arts Film School again. I met Mark Freiberger, and did his third and fourth year thesis films. And he got out, he graduated and put together his very first feature within 3 months of graduation. It was an ensemble piece with Will Patton that he cast me as one of the leads in. So it was like bam, bam, bam. So sometimes
hold on a second. Yeah. I have a special thanks in the credits on that film.
Yes, you do. Well. Yes, you do. Now, getting back around to the business, tell me a little bit about what you learned from the whole process of ball and chain.
Oh.
So, all right. I made him cringe, right? Because I love that reaction. So, what was it originally titled?
So, it was originally called The Arrangement, and was written by myself and Tommy Lambeth, our dear brother, who is no longer with us, sadly. I am blessed that I get to say Tommy many times a day because my son is named Tommy after him.
Yeah.
And we wrote that script in 5 days. And they optioned it. We were negotiating to have something done with this company, and they were kind of hemming and hawing. And we just wrote the first 10 pages and sent it to them. Just go, here you go. And like, we didn't hear anything for a day. And the next day a FedEx arrived with a contract. And I think there was like $1,000 check in there for our, down payment. Yeah. And like, it was that kind of a thing. And, that's not something I recommend people do in terms of screenwriting, but we were just trying to get the deal finished, and, we were young, and they loved it. And they said only one thing, we needed it in 5 days, or no, 6 days or something like that. And Tom and I just looked at each other and we're like, all right, because I would never do that now. But and we wrote 15, 20 hours a day. And I would write, and then Tommy would get on and start writing. And his writing style is completely different than mine. Yeah. Like just about as night and day as it could be. And so when I was tired, he'd like move towards the seat. And I'd be like, no, I can go on a little longer. And I would just stay in the seat. And we did it that way where, we talked about things, and then I did the typing just so there was a consistent voice. Yeah. And we knocked out in 5 days. We negotiated a reasonable payout, like tens of thousands of dollars, not like hundreds of dollars or a few thousand. And we specifically had in our contract that we will always be listed as first and second screenwriter, because we weren't getting a SAG deal or any kind of, this wasn't a union deal or anything like that. And they took it, they went and filmed it. We went to the location, and we were meeting people and met the actors. Cal Penn was one of the actors in it. Purva Bedi was in it. A lot of big names from India. It was a big moment for me because it was my first IMDb credit, which kind of legitimizes you. And they brought in 2 or 3 actors from India, and my parents knew who they were. And that kind of legitimized me in their eyes. Like, oh, like Asrani is this Indian actor that was in one of huge movies in India called Sholay. And it played in theaters for like 20 years, like that kind of a movie. Wow. And he was one of the father's characters in it. And so eventually one day I went to talking to a friend of mine, and he goes, hey man, what was the name of that movie that you wrote? I said, they changed the name to Ball and Chain. But I told him what it was, and he looked it up online. And I'm like, just look it up under my name. He goes, I am, and there's nothing there. And I went to check my IMDb, and it was gone. And there was some person's name as screenwriter that I had never heard of before. Oh. No one said anything to us, and no one mentioned anything. And yeah, it was heartbreaking, man. It was because at this point, you're working towards it. I think we were 4 or 5 years in towards trying to get something made, and finally got something made. Finally got some legitimization, if you will, from what's going on. And it was devastating. I remember, I don't think I talked for about a month. And if you know me, that's a pretty big thing because I'm a talker.
Yeah, I remember when that happened.
I was just devastated. And eventually we just threatened to sue, and they just put us under story consultants. So if you go to the IMDb page, story consultants.
Even though they wrote every last word of it.
We wrote the whole thing, and then we saw it finally, because we weren't invited to a premiere, and we weren't invited to any. We were treated pretty poorly as far as stuff you hear from screenwriters. We were thankful to be allowed to go on set, and then we had a little video camera, and we were recording interviews with people, and then the producer. The production office called and demanded that we destroy all the tapes and this, that, and the other, and it became a whole thing. So we just left. It was filmed over in Austin, Texas, and we were, traveling there from North Carolina. So we still have the footage.
What was their reasoning for destroying them?
The producer was a dick, and I will let you print that publicly. Insecure little ass, and it's funny because if you walked on set and somebody goes, "Who's that?" your immediate response would be, "Well, that's clearly the bad guy in the movie," because he looked like he was the bad guy in a movie. Nope, that's the producer. I don't know what he's doing now, but
That's awesome.
But the flip side of that is that Script put a down payment on my house, so you can't be mad about that.
Yeah.
When the movie finally did come out, it was still mostly what we wrote, minus anything artistic or meaningful.
Right.
all that was removed. And so it wasn't quite as hard a pill to swallow,
Right.
that our names weren't on it, even though it was heartbreaking. But that's the business. And, we seriously thought about hiring counsel and actually suing. But at the beginning of our career, we were fearful of being labeled that sue companies that pay them to write scripts. You know what I mean? So we just took the money and ran, and it was fine. And it worked out. And
looking back, do you wish you had pursued that?
I don't think so. I think we could. I mean, clearly we would have won, because in the contract it says you cannot, take our name off of it. But at that point, our careers were well on their way. We had made Chicks 101. We were doing documentaries all over the world and just doing all kinds of neat stuff, teaching at wonderful schools, and it wasn't worth the energy.
Yeah.
From a business standpoint, there's been multiple situations where you deal with stuff. Like one time, I had someone who sued me, said they owned half my company. No contract, no anything, no conversation where we actually said anything. And my lawyer was like, "You need to write a check and make this person go away. I'll get them to sign something that they can never bring this up again." And I'm like, "But I'm right."
Yeah.
That count for anything. And he said, "This person's kind of kooky, and you can't fight kooky and win, because they'll just keep coming at you and keep coming at you and keep coming at you, and you'll end up paying me 10 times what they're asking to be paid." And so from the business side of it, I wrote a massive check, like buy a nice car kind of check. The only time I ever think about it is now, when someone asks me about it. It's one of the better decisions I've ever made. Just run with it and move on. And that's the business side of things, and it sucks. And you got to understand that that's going to happen. Yeah. And you just roll with it.
Yeah. Thank you for your time. And tell you have any last thoughts of like one last little punch you want to give?
I think I just want to reiterate something I've already said. If you have any desire to be an actor, a producer, a director, a screenwriter, work in the arts, painter, whatever, you need to understand you are an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You need to know what your value is worth. You need to know what the professional norms are. Okay? You need to understand that kind of stuff. There's this seemingly pandemic thing of need for instant gratification going on. I'm an actor. Boom. Let me go straight to Spielberg and hand him my headshot. And no, that doesn't work that way. You don't track the person down and find out where they're being presented a thing, and and they're going to tell you, I can't take that from you. I can't,
Yeah.
you know, and just understand the other 2/3 of the business. Learn from Mr. Keith Harris. He will teach you. He's been through it just like I have. We've all been through the ringer. And prepare yourself before you head out.
That's awesome. Man, I appreciate it.
Always, brother.
All right, man.
All right. Bye.